So when you say the book of Isaiah is intact, how similar is it to the book of Isaiah that's in the Bible?
So that one is fascinating. So this isn't true for all of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but when we discovered the Great Isaiah Scroll, previous to that, the earliest copy of Isaiah that we had was in the Masoretic text, which is in the Middle Ages.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it was literally 1,000 years. We literally pushed back our understanding of Isaiah 1,000 years. And the thing that really shocked scholars, like I said, this isn't true for all of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but one of the things that shocked them about Isaiah was that it was word for word identical to the Masoretic text.
Word for word.
Word for word.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that
So this
it
is the
right
Great
there?
Isaiah Scroll. So if you go to Israel and
Wait,
you go...
is that papyrus?
Yes. No, I think that one is vellum.
What is vellum?
So I should be more specific. So parchment is animal skin. Vellum can be used synonymously with the term parchment. Technically, parchment is like baby animal skin, like calves or lambs. But this is the Great Isaiah Scroll, and you can see like they stitch together the parchment because it's so long.
God, it's so beautiful. The way they wrote back then was so beautiful. I mean, maybe it's because I can't read it, that it's so fat. Maybe if I saw English, I would think that's beautiful too.
Yeah.
Especially script, like if cursive. Cursive is very beautiful. But that is so fascinating because obviously coming from a point of ignorance, the letters look so similar. Like so many of, this is the what I always got about cuneiform. When I look at that, I'm like, whoa. It's just one particular sort of character that's this way and that way and up and down and...
Oh, cuneiform is wild.
Weird.
It's really, really tricky. And that's the thing when, like, if you're studying ancient languages and you start to study Greek, like, the Greek alphabet is similar enough that you're like, okay, alpha looks like an A, right? Delta looks like a D. So you can figure it out. And so it tricks you because you start off and you're like, oh, this is phobios, fear. I know what a phobia is. And you get this false sense of encouragement. And then, the further you go down the rabbit hole, you're like, oh, I'm screwed. So, but Hebrew is completely the opposite because the writing system is so different. The learning curve is hard at the beginning. And then you're like, everything is just 3 letters with a suffix added to it. And so it feels like, whereas the opposite is true with Greek. Greek, you're like, I get this. And then when you really go down the rabbit hole, you're like, oh, crap. None of the things that I learned about that are supposed to be standard, all of them have exceptions.
Wow.
But cuneiform's a wild one.
Do you know who Rick Strassman is?
No.
He's a scholar, and he did a lot of early work, FDA-approved work on psychedelics. And he spent 16 years teaching himself to read ancient Hebrew.
Nice.
Yeah, so because he wanted to really understand the Bible from the original source of ancient Hebrew and to understand it in context. Because ancient Hebrew, the way the words are structured, is so different than English, and that something must be lost in translation. So he spent 16 years teaching himself how to read ancient Hebrew. I was like, that is that is such dedication. 16 years.
It's a long time. That seems too long.
Well, you're self-taught. I mean, he's doing it himself.
Yeah. Self-teaching. Yeah. I self-taught myself Greek at first, and then when I started learning it formally, I realized how much you miss when you self-teach yourself.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, how many people can teach you ancient Hebrew? How many courses are available?
Oh, you can take it at any graduate college.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And is it, it's not something that we know what it sounded like, correct?
Yeah, I mean, this is the big debate with ancient languages.
Right.
Like, same thing with... Yeah, arguably, we don't know how any of this was pronounced.
Right.
I mean, modern Greek speakers get really mad at me when I say that because they're like, of course we know how it's pronounced. It's pronounced like we pronounce it, right? And on all my videos where I'm like site translating Greek manuscripts, there's so many comments of modern Greek speakers getting mad at how I'm pronouncing things. But realistically, we don't really know how most of the things are pronounced. With anything.
But isn't that very bizarre when you're translating? Like if you go back to, like, say, the Epic of Gilgamesh, we don't even know what the words sounded like.
Yeah.
We kind of know what they represent, and then we do a literal translation of what they represent. But if you've never heard, no one can speak ancient Sumerian.
Yeah. Well, Sumerian's a wild one because it's a language isolate.
What does that mean?
So Hebrew is an Afro-Semitic language. So Hebrew is related to all of these other languages like Aramaic and Akkadian, but language isolates have no adjacent comparisons.
Whoa.
So, because I tried to teach myself Sumerian and I failed and I just gave up because I couldn't do it because I had nothing to really compare it to.
Right.
So Sumeriologists are very they're a field of their own because I learned a little bit of Akkadian because I had studied Semitic languages, and there's enough crossover between things like Hebrew and Aramaic and Akkadian, but Sumerian you have nothing to compare it to. And
What did it eventually become?
It just died.
It just died.
It just died.
How? Do we know?
I mean, the Sumerians lost to the Assyrians, and the Assyrians got taken over by the Babylonians. I mean, it's just the course of history where things happen. But there are a number of ancient languages that are language isolates, like Linear Elamite. We had no idea what Linear Elamite even said until 2021.
Oh, well, I never even heard it until 5 seconds ago.
I know. There you go. Jamie, if you pull up, if you look up, what's it called? There's a cup, a silver cup. It'll come up if you Google image Linear Elamite, because you think cuneiform looks wild. Linear Elamite is completely different than that too. And there's a silver cup, which we had no idea what it said. And then a bunch of researchers, ancient Near Eastern researchers, developed. Well, so let's in the corner there, that one on
Far left corner?
Oh no, here now it's moved because he clicked it. That one, yeah, click that. So that's Linear Elamite.
Whoa!
And so that's in and around the same time that languages like Sumerian. So there's this very interesting kind of, if we're talking about a story in the Bible like the Tower of Babel, where it says that God confused their languages and everybody started speaking different languages, you have these languages that just pop up and out of nowhere and have no relation to one another. So Akkadian starts to adopt certain words in Sumerian, but they're still Sumerian words. It's like pizza is Italian, right? Or like kayak is Inuit. But when you're looking at the words that carry over, it's not because there's a relationship between Akkadian and Sumerian. It's because you have these cultures that live side by side, and eventually Akkadian starts to adopt these things. But Sumerian is, so that's why when I see people like Billy Carson talk about being able to read Sumerian, I'm like, dude, I read ancient languages and I've tried and I can't make heads or tails of Sumerian. Yeah. So
that's a tell.
Unfortunately, it kind of gives away.
Listen, I like Billy. He was a nice guy. I really enjoyed talking to him. I really do. I think his videos are fun, but I also think truth is important.
I have no problem with him as an individual.
He just needs to course correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, course correct and recognize what you know and what you don't know, and that you're not doing people a service, especially people like myself that aren't educated in this. Like we turn to others who claim to have a vast knowledge of this to help me out. Tell me what's going on. When I sit down and talk to you, tell me what's going on. And if you don't really know, you're fucking over a lot of people, unfortunately, for yourself.
Yeah.
This how do you say it again? Linear Elamite. Can you put that back up again, Jamie? So this was in 20. Can you show me that image that you'd showed me before?
Actually, see if you can find the cup.
That's pretty dope, right?
If you scroll, there should be a cup. I think it's called the dashed.
Is that it in the lower corner?
No,
it's not the cup.
No, if you go, it's got. Yeah, if you look up cup, that guy. So see that inscription at the top beside the face.
Yeah.
So that's the one. So it goes around the top of the cup, and they cracked that.
Look at that dude's honker.
He's got a big nose, isn't it?
That's a hell of a nose.
Yeah, he can smell that Linear Elamite. And so actually, interestingly enough, if you pull back, Jamie, that's my so there's an infographic that I made that just popped up. So if you click that guy,
there?
that's the one I made. Why is it coming up like that?
Someone else reposted it.
Oh, okay.
So is it just bad resolution? Is that what you're saying? Oh, there it is.
Oh, no, this is mine.
That's
so
yours. Okay.
So actually, here, I'll be self-serving. If you go to wesleyhuff.com.
That is so, can we just look at that for a second? That is so cool. And how old is this?
20th century BC.
Wow.
Yeah.
So 4,000 plus years ago.
Yeah. So if you go, Jamie, to wesleyhuff.com and then click my infographics tab at the top. So I started making these things for the graduate students I was teaching. And so if you go down, there should be an archaeology section. And in the archaeology section, I have that one on, I'm blanking on what it's called. I make ones for manuscripts too.
What a great website you've got.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
This is awesome. It's so detailed.
Yeah, so there's a linear Elamite one.
What a fucking phenomenal resource this is.
Right there.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, Marv Dash. That's what it's called. So yeah, you see this. So I have Sumerian, linear Elamite, Akkadian, and Paleo-Hebrew there at the bottom, the comparisons. And these are languages that operated like alongside one another, but are almost completely foreign to one another. So there is crossover between Akkadian and Paleo-Hebrew.
So that's interesting. Sumerian, when I'm thinking of cuneiform, I'm not thinking of that, right? That looks different than some of like the clay scrolls, where they've, the imprintations that they make with a clay wheel.
Yeah, well, it's all done with the stylus. So it's like a little wedge stylus. So there are different variations of it, but ultimately it's done with the stylus. The thing that's interesting, like you're probably thinking more of what that later Akkadian looks like, right? Where it's like the wedges.
Yeah.
So Akkadian basically borrowed the writing system. And it had development over time, but is very close.
So when they conquered them, did they have their own writing system initially and just incorporated Sumerian writing to theirs?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that one. But
God, I'd like to know.
I know, right?
I mean, it's so long ago, but not,
Yeah.
I mean, it's so long ago in terms of a human life.
Yeah.
But it's not that long when you think, like, we went from 4,000 years ago to that to large language models.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, quantum computing.
Yeah. Well, even if you look at language systems develop. Paleo-Hebrew turns into what we saw in the Dead Sea Scrolls, whereas Paleo-Hebrew is a little bit different than what we eventually see in the Dead Sea Scrolls because there's like a development within the language. And then modern Hebrew adopts the Hebrew in the Dead Sea Scrolls, but modern Hebrew has vowels that were developed in the Middle Ages to figure out how to pronounce it. Because basically, ancient Hebrew doesn't have a vowel system.
In the Gnostic texts, the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in 1946-47, the oldest unedited records of the Old Testament. Push the date back 1,000 years. In 45 and 46, the oldest records of the New Testament and the texts that were excluded were discovered in a little village along the Nile in Egypt called Nag Hammadi. Can I just tell? It's a crazy story.
Sure.
There's not much firewood along the Nile in Egypt, and there was a woman who needed kindling to feed her family, to build the fires, to feed her family and heat their home. And she told her son, go find some kindling, and he was very resourceful. There's no trees, so he found an old tomb. And in the tomb were clay vases, and he opened those vases, and there were documents that were very dry and brittle and made great kindling.
Oh, no.
And we don't know how many were lost before the authorities were noted, but right now there are 13 bound.
They cooked a bunch of them?
They burned, they used them for fuel.
Oh, my God.
Here's what's left. What's left, there were 13 bound books representing over 50 texts. They were the oldest records of the New Testament, and they were the records that were excluded by the Catholic Church.
Is there any images of these books?
Yeah.
Jamie, can you find those?
Well, I've got them on my... I brought this for you.
All right. Oh, Jimmy found them.
Look at them, but yeah, so there's the 13 bound texts. So among these were things like the Gospel of Thomas, which is considered the second most heretical book in the Nag Hammadi library. There's the Gospel of John, also called the Secret Book of John, also called the Apocryphon of John, which is considered the first most heretical book. There are books from Gnostic women. Thunder Perfect Mind is a book by a Gnostic woman that's in there. The Gospel of James is in there. So these These, and I'll be very clear, if you had Wes Huff here, I know you've had before, and I think he's a brilliant scholar, he would say that these are not accepted because they're not accepted by the church because of dating and because of, there's a lot of reasons, but there's a lot of new research showing that that these are worthy of exploring with the same validity that we give to the other texts that we're seeing.
What are they dated to?
They're dated the late 1st, early 2nd century, somewhere right around there. Some of them later.
Yeah, but it's such a fascinating mystery.
It is.
Like, I wish I could read Aramaic and then read the Dead Sea Scrolls.
God, I know, man.
Because that's the oldest one we know of, right? That's the oldest version of the biblical stories.
I'm pretty sure, man. Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure. I imagine there's fragments and stuff that, like...
It's so fragmented that they had to use DNA to determine whether or not the scrolls were from the same cow. So, like, when you would find pieces of animal flesh that were from different cows, they knew, okay, we'll put that in this pile.
God damn, dude. That would have been a fun archaeological dig to be working on. Like,
But also, what a mind fuck. Like trying to piece that puzzle together and try to figure out, how old is the Dead Sea Scrolls? Like 4,000 years old or something?
Dude, I don't know. I have no idea.
See how old the Dead Sea Scrolls are. I know they found them in Qumran. They found them in clay tablet or clay pots. 3rd century BCE.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, man. I mean, then like when you get into like the Torah, Hebrew, when you get into like a lot of the stuff Jesus was referencing, and you realize, like, not only is it like powerful writing with like incredible parables in it about like ways society collapses or families collapse or a life collapses, it also is like mathematical. Like that, I can't remember the name of it. There's a whole thing where you, like the number, I know we've talked about this, God and nature, same number. Like
God and love is the same.
That.
Yeah.
So what the fuck?
It's ancient Hebrew. Their numbers doubled as letters.
Yeah, and then you see there's an intentionality to that patterning.
Yeah.
And so then you realize, like, oh, so like on top of telling these powerful stories, they figured out a way to encode within the powerful stories more information that only people are going to find if they dig deeper, that's designed to be there for you if you want it, but you've got to want it. You got to dig in.
And human beings are like, that language is too complicated. Let's abandon it.
Learning that shit.
They abandoned it.
Well, not
we think
Hebrew,
about how complicated. Ancient Hebrew.
I guess you're right,
speaks that anymore. Also uncovered was a 6,000-year-old skeleton of a partially mummified child in a 10,500-year-old basket, which Israeli authorities said could be the oldest in the world. A CT scan revealed the child's age was between 6 and 12, with the skin, tendons, and even hair partially preserved.
2021. I don't remember hearing about this.
I don't remember hearing about that either.
I've never heard that.
Wow.
So it's like 8,000 BC-ish, or even 8,500 BC when they found this basket was made.
Wait, what is can we read that? Among the recovered texts, which are still all in Greek, is Nahum 1:5-6, which says, "The mountains quake because of him, and the hills melt. The earth heaves before him, the world and all that dwell therein. Who can stand before his wrath? Who can resist his fury? His anger pours out like fire, and rocks are shattered because of him." Fuck. I mean, that's nature.
Wow. Hold up, go there back. It says the authorities said these words differ slightly from other Bible versions, shedding a rare light on how biblical text changed over time from its earliest form. The Dead Sea Scrolls have a lot of really weird stuff in them.
Like what?
Well, the Christian stuff, the John Marco Allegro stuff from the Sacred Mushroom and the Cross.
Yeah.
That's all his interpretation, and I'm sure you would have to be a scholar to understand even what the fuck they're saying. But he was essentially saying that you can trace back the word Christ to an ancient Sumerian word, which means a mushroom covered in God's semen. And he thinks that when God orgasmed on the earth, things would blossom from it. This is like what the way ancient people used to think of when it rained. They used to
Wow.
literally think God was coming, and then when those mushrooms would just appear out of the grass, which, mushrooms grow really quickly. You know that.
Yeah.
So when people would wake up in the morning and see these mushrooms after the rain, and they would eat them and trip their fucking balls off.
Yeah.
John Marco Allegro believed that this was the source of the original Christianity.
Wow.
That it was about psychedelic rituals, and it was about fertility cults. Wow. Yeah, it was about people trying to duplicate, trying to have children.
I mean,
And,
that's crazy, man.
Yeah.
Oh God, that would have been so fun to trip back then. Like it's from God's jizz.
Those and then said, okay, we got to put this into a book. And then it became the Bible much later, around 100 AD. But he subscribed to the theory that these people interacted with beings in some way, shape, or form, and that also this information is so incredible that it became part of the biblical text.
Did you ever read the Dead Sea Scrolls?
Yes, yeah.
So the Dead Sea Scrolls, what was it found in? What year was that? It was in Qumran, right? They found
It's
them in these-
Qumran, but I think again this was also, I believe, in the late 1800s or early 1900s.
is when they found
Yeah.
them. So these things are written on animal skins, and this is this is a very old version of those exact same stories, or some of similar stories.
Yeah.
There's a lot of weirdness in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Like,
Yeah.
I haven't read it, but is there any references to anything that's similar, like Anunnaki type characters, the Nephilim, or anything like that in the Dead Sea Scrolls?
They show up everywhere. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the Enuma Elish, and the Epic of Atrahasis. Of course, even in the Bible, they're known as the Anak, A-N-A-K. We were grasshoppers in their eyesight, it says in the biblical text. So no matter where you go in any culture, you're going to discover that these beings, in some way, shape, or form, engaged mankind, brought knowledge, teaching, building techniques, and just so much more wisdom and information, esoteric wisdom, alchemy. All these things came from these people.
So the craziest version of this story is that they genetically engineered us out of lower primates and put us here to mine gold.
Right.
And then established different types of civilizations and taught us how to build things, taught us all these different things. And enough time has passed that we've kind of forgotten. Enough time has passed. That's the wackiest version of it, right?
Right. That's the bare bones minimum.
Yeah, the wackiest version is they made us, which is we've talked about this a couple of times, but how bizarre it is that human beings have this incredible fascination for gold. We're fascinated with gold.
Yeah.
This fascination with gold is really weird. Like, why back when it was basically useless? You couldn't make a knife out of it. You
Right.
couldn't, it didn't make sense that this would be so valuable. Just because it's rare, you're barely alive.
Right.
We're going, right? We're going back to full-on hunter and
Yeah.
gatherer, our ancestors with spears and stone chipped, and then after that, gold emerges, and it stays.
Yeah.
It stays forever. Yeah. Now, when you read Zecharia Sitchin's book, he talks about this in the 1970s. His description of it was that they needed to suspend gold particles in the atmosphere because their atmosphere was being destroyed.
Right.
Then you move to like somewhere around the 2000s when climate scientists start proposing this idea of suspending reflective particles in the atmosphere.
Right.
And then when you realize the unique properties of gold, how unusual it is in terms of like a building material, you can coat things. The reason why things are like coated in gold, silver plated, gold plated rather, you can take a tiny piece of gold and cover an enormous area with it. It's
Yeah.
a strange metal.
Yeah.
Like really weird. And what, the supposed story is, it's very common on Earth, very rare on Nibiru.
Right. Yeah, that's the story. And now when I started looking into this gold thing myself, and here's what I came up with. So when you start analyzing the text, you discover that there was an encampment in a place called South Africa at Adam's Calendar. Okay. Now at Adam's Calendar, there's actually the very first gold mines discovered. They're dating them back to about 200,000 years ago. And that's incredible because there's a building there that looks like a worn down structure. Now, in the tablets, it talks about the fact that the Ijiji, who were the working class Anunnaki beings who were cleaning out the Euphrates and Tigris River so they can create irrigation and create a bustling civilization. Also, they were doing the actual construction themselves. No people needed, just them working. They were like the construction workers, and Anu and Enki and Enlil, these leader gods, were like the foremen, the master architects and so forth, right? The boss. So these people were working, but they weren't supposed to be enslaved. They were volunteers. They got tired of doing the work, according to them, for about 250,000 years of labor on Earth, and also, according to them, on Mars. This is in the text. They call it Lamu. And so they decided to go to war against Enki, Enlil, and Anu because their demands had not been met. So they went to meet them in the Epic of Atrahasis. They go to Adam's calendar. They go to that same structure that was discovered where that gold mine is located.
One of the things you talked about was that there was this transference, like the Eucharist eventually became a placebo. Do you think that what do you think it was initially? Do you think it was a psychedelic mushroom?
So that's Allegro certainly thought that, right?
Right. John Marco Allegro, author of The Sacred Mushroom and the Scroll.
So he releases that book in 1970, and he claims that Christianity is the guise for a Near Eastern fertility cult. And I think it's very interesting, but there aren't many linguists who support the proposition.
Right. There's a lot of people that disagree with him pretty heavily, right?
I mean, from like a purely linguistic perspective, it's, to explain it briefly, so he says that...
Did you read this, The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross?
Yeah.
Did you read it?
Several times.
Did you read the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Christian Myth as well?
From Allegro.
Yeah, that's the one that was... So the Catholic Church bought out the original one, right? And it was very difficult to get a hold of for the longest time. You had to buy copies of it.
I've heard rumors to that effect, yes.
Yeah, and then he comes out with the second book, the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Christian Myth. What did you, knowing as much as you know about language, like what did you feel like he made leaps? Did you feel like he made these connections that maybe were based on speculation?
So he writes, it's pure philology, right? So it's word games and things that only linguists, I think it's incredible that people who aren't linguists can actually read that. It's really, really difficult to read Sacred Mushroom and the Cross. But the basic premise is that the New Testament, written in Greek, has this Semitic substratum. So underneath the Greek, the author, the gospel writers and Paul are actually referring to different terms in Hebrew or Aramaic, and that these terms have in turn come from the Sumerian, which any linguist would say is a language isolate, that there is no real relationship between Sumerian and the Indo-European languages like Greek and the Semitic. So the premise of the argument is something that most linguists don't accept. However, and Carl Ruck has written the afterword to one of the editions you probably have of Sacred Mushroom and the Cross. And he gets into some complex theories about psycholinguistics and this interesting idea that just because they aren't related, there are certain words, certain names, certain vocabulary, like plant definitions, which would carry across the different languages. And I find that somewhat interesting. But when you dig into the words that Allegro was recreating, he places an asterisk actually next to these words because they can't be corroborated by the ancient texts. So some of these Sumerian words he straight up hypothesizes as existing, but they can't really be found in the existing tablets. So it's hard to correlate some of those meanings he draws down from the Sumerian. But that said, he makes very interesting claims. For example, like in 1 Corinthians 22, there's this interesting line where he says about we preach Christ crucified is a skandalon for the Jews and a folly for the Greeks. And skandalon in Greek means like a bolt or a snare, like a trap. And Allegro ties it to like a tikla in Aramaic, which is like what he calls the bolt mushroom, and in Sumerian ukushtigila. And so he's saying that Paul's actually telling the Jews that the Christ crucified is a mushroom instead of a skandalon. It's like a code word. Like the skandalon is a mushroom, and then for the Greeks, he says it's a folly, which is moira in Greek, which actually means mandrake, which is another psychedelic plant. So there's all this different wordplay going on, but it's really hard to tease out any physical forensic evidence for this stuff, which was what I went after.
Was Allegro's position, if I recall correctly, that the sacred mushroom was Amanita muscaria?
Yeah, that was even the cover of his book. It was a photo of Amanita muscaria.
and that's where I think Allegro did amazing work, but that's one area where I have a problem with Amanita muscaria as the psychedelic of choice in early Christianity, because in shamanic cultures where Amanita muscaria is used, it's recognized that the mushroom is much more effective after it's been passed through a human body, or indeed through the body of a reindeer, and emerged in urine. And so those shamanistic cultures of Siberia use Amanita muscaria by drinking it in the urine of a shaman who has previously consumed the mushroom. And I don't see a lot of evidence for that in early Christianity. And it's why I like the work that Brian has done, looking at the really hard evidence for psychedelics in early Christianity, which are not in this case Amanita muscaria, if I'm correct, Brian.
Isn't the speculation about Amanita muscaria that it's seasonable? It's seasonal. It's also genetically variable. Like there's different species of, like, much like different fruits taste differently. There's different versions of the Amanita muscaria that have more psychedelic compounds in them, and then there's all sorts of ways of preparing them that we've completely lost. Am I getting this wrong? 'Cause I've only had one Amanita muscaria experience, and it wasn't very convincing.
Yeah, and this is often the case, but I'm told, I've not had the experience myself, but I'm told that if you can bear the idea of drinking the shaman's urine after he or she has consumed the Amanita muscaria, you will have a really powerful journey.
Yeah, but you don't want a shaman just laughing hysterically after you drink his urine.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, the joke's on you, stupid. Yeah. There's also so many correlations between the Amanita muscaria and Santa Claus to shamans. There's so
the colors, the red and white.
Yes. Yeah. There's also the bag, the toys, the fact that they would dry them on these coniferous trees, the fact that these mushrooms have this mycorrhizal relationship with coniferous trees, where they tend to grow under pine trees, which is the tree that we use for Christmas trees. The fact that they're bright red, like a toy that is in a package waiting for a child to open it up. There's so many of these weird connections. The colors, the fact that reindeer are with Santa Claus, the fact these reindeer fly
through the heavens.
Yeah, I mean, and that caribou are notoriously attracted to Amanita muscaria mushrooms. In fact, people that have had psychedelic rituals and gone outside to urinate have talked about caribou knocking them over to try to get to their urine. And caribou are reindeer. They have been observed eating these things. So they have this weird relationship. All those things are together, connected in some sort of a strange way. And there's also a history of shamanic rituals being outlawed in Siberia, and the way they got around it was they would come through the chimney, which is just crazy. They would climb onto people's roofs and slide down the chimney to deliver the mushrooms.
It's just another example of the way that our culture takes an ancient historical truth and completely castrates it and turns it into Santa Claus. Whereas what we're actually dealing with are profound experiences in deeply altered states of consciousness.
Well, it's also, this information seems to have been lost fairly recently, because if you go back to the early 1950s and 40s, and look at Christmas cards. The Christmas cards and depictions of Christmas almost always contained elves and Amanita muscaria mushrooms. The Amanita muscaria mushroom was synonymous with Christmas for some strange reason. Have you ever seen those old? Yeah, it's crazy, right? Yeah. Like, what is that?
Like, it's all over the fairy tale books too. You can't avoid the Amanita.
Yeah.
Everywhere you look, which is why I think Allegro was also interested, writing in 1970 and studying it in the 50s and 60s. I think that's why he glommed onto the Amanita.
But it's such an unconvincing mushroom. Like, the people that I know that have experienced it in terms of a psychedelic ritual, it's just, I don't know anybody who's really blown their brains out with it.
No, and Gordon Wasson also thought it was the ingredient behind soma as well. He writes a book about this in 1968, Soma, Divine Mushroom of Immortality. That was his guess too for Soma.
But Wasson was experienced with psilocybin, which is so universally regarded as being effective. That's why it's so confusing.
I always found that strange too, to be honest. So Wasson, I mean, to explain where this comes from, Wasson has this incredible experience with Maria Sabina in 1955 in Oaxaca, Mexico, and when he consumes we think psilocybe mexicana. And he is catapulted to the heavens, and he has this vision that he describes as the realest thing he's ever experienced under the influence of the psilocybin. And the thought occurs to him, he writes later in 1957 in Life magazine. He says that could it be the case that the divine mushrooms are in fact the answer behind the ancient mysteries? Which is why he then went and started looking at the Amanita, perhaps, or eventually ergot, which is where I pick up the scent. At some point in his correspondence with Albert Hofmann, they together began focusing on ergot, like we said, because it's so common and so natural, but so highly toxic too. And Albert claimed to have this experience with it, and so for years and years, after teaming up with Carl Ruck, they were convinced that ergot had to somehow be involved.
Now, I know that Jimmy has looked at that. Yeah, and I don't know Jimmy personally. I like the guy without knowing him. You interviewed him, right?
Yeah, very nice guy.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah. I'd like to get him out in the field with me and show him some stuff firsthand. I bet he would love that.
I
think
he's
he would.
A giant fan of your work.
I like to hear that. Well, I'm a fan of his work, but I don't happen to agree on this one.
Well, I mean, I don't even know if he agrees. I think he's just speculating.
Yeah.
He's not dogmatic. Like, he doesn't have like a rigid perspective on this.
Yeah, here you can see, there's the recat structure. What is interesting, though, is look at this. You've got this structure up here, the terminate tenoma. I forget how you pronounce that. I knew how to pronounce it. But anyways, that's an impact crater there. There's one here. We can actually, if we go back, the Tenumer crater in Mauritania, that's impact. And the Temimichat.
That's it.
So what's interesting, though, check this out. There's one, there's two, and here's the recat structure. They fall in a perfect alignment. Now, what's the explanation there? I don't know.
Could just be coincidence, right?
Could be coincidence, yeah. Could be coincidence.
One of the things that he said about the recat structure was that around it, the white appears to be salt.
Which could be. And I mean, see, the rim rock of this is late Cretaceous, about 90 million years old. So at that point, it was below the ocean, right? So it's been uplifted. I think this thing is about 1,400 or 1,500 feet above sea level, if memory serves me correct. So it's been eroded. You see, this whole thing here is like an erosion. You had a massive amount of water that came down over this, and most likely is what exposed this thing to the surface. It was probably buried. Let's see here. So right there is, from Plato, that's the ringed city of Atlantis to scale.
The concentric rings.
The concentric ring. So this is the actual scale superimposed onto the recat structure.
So it's much smaller in scale.
Yeah.
But Plato's scale was based on what?
The stade. It was based on the stade, which is roughly 607 feet. It's where we get the word stadium from.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because that was the length of a stadium in ancient Greece.
So when you look at Plato's version of this, sorry to take you on this detour, but I was just curious. When you look at Plato's version of Atlantis, is there an area of the world that seems likely? Yeah?
Yeah. You better watch my 6-hour presentation,
Okay,
Joe.
I will.
Yeah, no, but I look, it's detailed. That's why even in 6 hours, I can't really spell it. In my podcast I did, the first 9 episodes, 2 hours each, were devoted to, I thought, well, let's kick it off with Atlantis.
18 hours of Atlantis.
18 hours of it. The last episode 9 was devoted to the recat structure.
Wow.
So I had eight hours, so 16 hours, but we had some chatter and things like that in there, so maybe more like 12 or 14 hours. So you know who Johanna James is?
No.
She is a British actress who started doing this She's a really cool lady. She's very interested in all this kind of stuff. Very smart, extraordinarily beautiful. And she went on and did she does these like 20-minute, 30-minute little vignettes of things that she's really interested in, having to do a lot with, ancient cultures, all the kind of things that, Graham Hancock is, she reads Graham Hancock. She became a fan of mine, and she devoted one of her little 20 or 30-minute segments to, she said, I watched all 10 hours or 12 hours of Randall Carlson's programs on Atlantis. And so she did this like 30-minute little synopsis of it. Really did a great job. So we reached out to her. I invited her on. She came on. We did a live stream a couple of weeks ago with her as a guest. And just really fun lady. She's also does comedy.
Really?
Yeah. And she's very intelligent, very gorgeous. What can I say? You know, and smart and interested in all this kind of stuff. So, you know, there we go. Anyways, so she was very interested in the whole Atlantis thing. And so because of that, there was a lot of feedback and people wanting to know more. And so I thought, okay, now the 10 or 12 hours I did, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to condense that down. So a couple of weeks ago, we did the first 3-hour live stream where I basically started breaking down Plato's account line by line. What did he actually say? Let's look at the geology. Let's look at the geography, the oceanography, the astronomy, and see if it lines up, if it matches up. And so I think there's one place that pretty much is not all the details, but when you look at all of the areas around the planet that have been proposed for Atlantis, I think there's one place that fits the majority of his details, and that's the sunken Azores Plateau. And I say sunken because we know it's sunken, and it's right along the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. In fact, since we're on this subject, and I wasn't even thinking we'd get on this subject, there's the Azores Plateau right there. It straddles a triple plate junction, which you have the European plate, the African plate, and the North American plate here.
Well, it's up near Nova Scotia?
Yeah, it's far north. It is. But notice over here, it's really almost at the same latitude as Spain. See? And I would say that if there's any place on the planet that is most consistent with Plato's account, that's it right there.
And why is that? Without doing an 18-hour presentation.
Oh, come on, Joe. Can't we have pizza brought in?
We can.
Nah, that's why, in a nutshell, God, where do I even begin? So, I was afraid you were going to ask that, but we can look very quickly, I guess, like give you the 5-minute version, which is that there is evidence that there was a massive subsidence along the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. We actually talked about this a little bit, and I think in our very first discussion we had, which was what, 7, 8 years ago?
At least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked about this a little bit. Geophysics shows that there's horizontal movement, lateral movement of the Earth's crust because of continental drift, but there's also vertical movement. And that is the result of isostatic compensation. That's called isostasy, is the vertical movement of the Earth's crust. I can show you, I should have a slide right here that will help to really illustrate what it is. Let me back up to, let's see. Should be right in here. Here we go. Okay, so now this is the shore of Hudson Bay. Now this is where the ice sheet was the thickest, right? Now what are you seeing there? Hudson Bay is up here. These are shorelines because when the ice was removed, the land started rising back. So here's sea level, land is rising back.
And the land is rising because of a lack of weight of the ice?
Yes, right. So you're sitting on a soft, cushiony chair right now, right? Are you?
Yep.
Okay, so your ass is causing isostatic depression of that cushion on your chair.
Right.
And if you sit up, you'll have isostatic compensation. Right?
So that's what that is along many, many, many lines.
Yes, those are all shorelines. Wow. Here's another view of it.
Wow.
Here's another view.
Wow.
That's the land rebounding a couple of thousand feet after the ice was removed. Now, the ice was removed, and all of those trillions of tons of weight, where did it go? In the Atlantic Ocean. Now, you look, the thinnest crust on the Earth is the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. And if you look at it, you'll see that there are transform faults, which should show up right here. The transform faults are these vertical fault lines that you would say orthogonal or at right angles to the ridge itself. Here you can see very clearly the triple plate junction and how the Azores Plateau. Okay, well, since the 1940s, the first expedition in 1948, there was when they started doing dredge samples from the floor of the Atlantic Ocean, which coincidentally, the name of the ship was the Atlantis. They dredge core samples, and they pull up the core samples from 2 miles down, a mile to 2 miles down, and they look at those core samples. And what you had was, for example, shallow water creatures living. They weren't living. They were now, they had been drowned. You had creatures like that typically lived under 100 feet of seawater. And now they're a mile and a half below. And they're on the flanks of this place right here.
So these are fossils that they're finding?
Yes.
And they're finding fossils that ordinarily you would find in some place that was very shallow.
Very shallow. Very shallow, yes.
Or relatively shallow, 100 feet.
100 feet, yes. So this is the basic idea here. This goes back to the 60s. As it says right here, the possible tectonic implications of glacial-eustatic. Now, eustatic is the rise and fall of sea level correlated with the increase and decrease of glacial ice. So if the ice is increasing, sea level is falling, and we call that eustatic sea level fall. If the ice is shrinking, melting, sea level's rising. So that's a eustatic rise. So that's the meaning of that. When you see glacial-eustatic, that means the rise and fall of the sea level as a result of glacier growth or melting. Okay? And it says here, sea level fluctuations have received only minor attention in connection with such problems as ocean floor spreading. The purpose of this report is to point out that late Pleistocene sea level data suggest that the ocean basins have responded isostatically and by a significant amount, particularly concentrated along the mid-Atlantic ridge. I've got so much here. I'm just going to grab a couple of these things here. Yeah. So they dug up these cobbles, which are, the cobbles are, so a cobble is basically a stone or anything that's lithified that's roughly between a pebble and a boulder. A boulder, when you get, I think, to 11 inches, about the size of a volleyball, now you're in the realm of boulders. A cobble is in between pebbles and boulders, like you've heard of cobblestone streets, they're fist-sized rocks, basically. So they say here, the Atlantis cruiser and Great Meteor seamounts rise from a broad ridge or plateau, which extends from the mid-Atlantic ridge, blah, blah, blah. Let's see. So about a ton of flat pteropod limestone cobbles was dredged from the summit area of one of these sunken, what they're calling the seamounts. And a seamount is like a flat-topped mountain, right? Like the top of the mountain has been sheared off, okay? So they pulled up these limestones, right? These limestone cobbles. They dated them. One of the cobbles gave an apparent radiocarbon age of 12,000 years, plus or minus 900 years. The state of lithification, how much it is turned into rock, of the limestone suggests that it may have been lithified under subaerial conditions. In other words, in the atmosphere. That's what that means. It may have been lithified under subaerial conditions, and the seamount may have been an island within the past 12,000 years.
Wow.
So, we could go through, again, hours of this kind of research, and why it's been pushed off to the side is anybody's guess. But it just doesn't fit the paradigm. But yeah, basically, now this doesn't prove that there was any civilization there, but we can make a very strong case that a large section of the Azores Plateau was above sea level during the late glacial maximum.
Does it coincide with Plato's account of trade and of travel and of the way?
Well, we have no way of knowing. See, now there we have to make a leap of faith, which is this. If we look right here, you'll see... you can see it very clearly, and you can see the Straits of Gibraltar here, which was anciently known as the Pillars of Heracles. And you come here to a group of islands, and then you get to the Azores Plateau. And here, these down here are those seamounts, those truncated seamounts. So really all you have to do, here's the leap of faith you have to make. You have to go Now, I don't get into anything like, whatever, flying spaceships or crystal ray guns or anything like that. No, I just go by what Plato says. What he's describing is a maritime culture that had navigational abilities. Something along the lines of the Minoan or the Phoenician culture, maybe by an order of magnitude, right? So now all we have to do really is assume this, which to me is not so pseudoscientific that we couldn't even consider it, which is that some group in the Ice Age had enough navigational skills to sail from Europe to islands right here.
So the Atlantis one. So,
the Rishat structure. I was
Yeah.
wondering if you saw those videos, Joe.
Yeah, no, that was a big one that I saw because I've been fascinated by the concept of Atlantis. Ever since I had these conversations with Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock about the Younger Dryas impact theory and this concept that somewhere in the roughly around 11,000, 12,000 years ago, we were hit by a series of comets. And it's pretty evident that that's a fact. If you do the core samples of the Earth, they find this nuclear glass all over the Earth that exists in that time period. And it seems like something happened that reset civilization. And there's very little evidence of advanced civilizations before that up until recently, up until the last couple of decades. They started uncovering things like Göbekli Tepe and all these other structures that are clearly from more than 12,000 years ago. And they're really complex and really large with enormous stones. And it's sort of caused people to rethink the history of the Earth and the history of human civilizations. And Atlantis has always been the big one. That has been the one that everybody talked about, was this incredibly advanced civilization, and no one can figure out where it is.
Right.
Or if it was real.
I think that Atlantis, because surely that wouldn't have been necessarily the name just through like the change of language, over, let's say, 12, 13,000 years ago, which would be the time frame. So like surely there would be several different changes of language, but I think it represented a civilization that was doing great things. They were more global than what many people think would be possible. Atlantis was said to be a kingdom made up of, or an empire, made up of 10 kingdoms. And then there was the lost city of Atlantis, which was the capital, which was said to be made up of concentric circles, 2 of water, 3 of land, and essentially that they were obliterated by a cataclysm as passed down by Plato, although it's worth mentioning that Plato got the story of Atlantis from Solon, who was his uncle separated by 6 generations. But what most people don't realize is that Solon had traveled to Egypt, and so it's the ancient Egyptians is where that tale comes from, which makes it even more bizarre because I would argue that the most spectacular ancient civilization is the Egyptians. I mean, no disrespect to the Romans.
Hard to deny.
Right? I mean, let me just say, because I want to, on this podcast, encourage people to travel to Egypt. Joe, you got to go.
I really want to. A friend of mine just went, and she got back, and she was telling me incredible things about it. Jamie, will you pull up the photos of these concentric circles? Tell him.
Yeah, the Rishat, Richat. It's worth mentioning
he's
that.
got it already here.
Yeah, in the first couple, I just want to say it's Rishat. I used to call it Rikat. I was mispronouncing it. But let me ask you this, Joe, real quick. When you saw my video, was that the very first time you had ever seen this thing before?
Yeah.
That's the thing. So many. When I first saw this, I was like, what the fuck is that? By the way, you see that white? All those white blemishes? That's salt. This was under the ocean. And people, let me just say, you mentioned Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock. I love them. And I know for sure that they don't particularly think this is the site for a few different reasons. So let me say there's absolute doubt. Even I am not 100% certain. I'm not even 100% certain Atlantis existed. What I am certain is that humans were doing spectacular things and a cataclysmic event happened called the Younger Dryas and reset something for somebody.
Is there a natural explanation for this formation?
Yes. So let me say that it is considered to be mysterious. They're not 100% certain of it. However, the consensus is that it was a volcanic dome that had risen and collapsed multiple times, like 100 million years ago, allegedly. I say allegedly, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with that. I'm just saying I would like to know where sometimes they get these figures from. Like, explain to me why it was 100 million years ago and not 99 or 98, because here we are talking about how crazy things changed in just the last 12, 13,000 years. So when they throw around these numbers, 1 million years in itself is an incredibly long period of time. But getting back to your question, Some had originally thought that maybe it was an impact site from an asteroid or perhaps, but there's no evidence for it. Like there's none of the
The problem is there's these concentric circles. I've never seen anything. I mean, obviously I'm not an archaeologist, but I've never seen anything like this if you study structures that are like man-made structures, I've never seen anything like this that humans have made, but I've definitely never seen go to that one where your cursor's on, Jamie.
Please.
So is this...
You want to see some? All right.
What is this? What am
Okay.
Okay, one step at a time, because we also have to take into consideration that people are just listening. So kind of describe what we're looking at here.
Okay, so what you're looking at is approximately 250 miles inland in the total barren desert of Mauritania, Africa. So the Western Sahara.
This image looks like... Why is it blue?
That's just showing you
what it used to look like?
No, this is what it looks like right now through, I forgot what you call this type of animation, but it's a satellite imagery that they enhanced in order for you to see the difference in elevation and the actual structure to itself.
Okay, so if there was water in this area, you would see it this way, that it would be these concentric circles that are raised above the water, and then the water would be inside of it like that.
Well, just to clarify, this particular image, no, this is not trying to represent water. So that blue is actually picking up on salt. So
salt, all that was salt. But I mean, it used to be underwater, right? It's salt because it was underwater.
That's what I believe, and that's what makes the most sense to me. Others will disagree, and let me tell you why. It is currently 1,300 feet above sea level. It's 250 miles inland. And so some people say this was never under the ocean, at least not for the last tens of millions of years, is what the scientists claim. I argue that since the salt is still there, and not only that, Jamie, if you go to the other images that show you more of the white, the one that you were previously on, the one to the middle to the left, right there. So those areas with the most white blemishes happen to be the areas that are the lowest in elevation, which to me tells me that saltwater had settled there. But not only that, Joe, Atlantis was said to be, like we said, multiple rings of, water and land. However, it was said to open to the sea to the south. And what you're looking at here, the south, so this is oriented north, south, east, and west. What do you see to the south? And especially if we could get another...
This is a very flat area that looks like it's the lowest elevation. Like around it looks like it's higher. I mean, it's hard to tell from this image.
Jamie, will you Google map it? Just type in... even if you went to Mauritania, so you could see this from space. Astronauts use it as a locator, and they weren't really familiar or aware of it until the Gemini missions in the early 1960s. So if you go to, if you just go to Google Earth, you'll be able to find this quite quickly. It stands out, and it's why they call it the Eye of Africa or the Eye of the Sahara. All right, so just pan out a little bit, and it'll provide us with keep going. All that white is salt. In fact, I had a friend, Josh Sigurdsson, that went out there and tasted that shit off the fucking ground. That's salt. Because a lot of people say, this was never under the ocean. And I'm like, all right, you see all that? Even Randall Carlson himself, which let me just say, he, for a few reasons, he favors the Azores. He doesn't think this is likely to be the location for a few reasons.
He favors what?
The Azores, the island chain, which would be, it's
And he thinks that was Atlantis?
To him, he's partial towards that. But so he analyzed this site, and you see all those striations, how it looks like the ocean, so that's all water erosion, Joe. And if you scroll in, so remember when Randall was on your show and he showed you the Missoula floodplains and all those giant ripples from the huge current that it went through? This is here. So scroll in, right there where your cursor is, Jamie. Scroll right in. You're going to see those same water ripples. Keep going, because this is what you're looking at here is panned out. This is many miles. Keep in mind, this structure is 30 miles across.
That's crazy. That looks like the bottom of the ocean, like if you see where the water breaks on the sand.
Yep. And I have
there's
that's better
crazy.
Pictures. And that, just to clarify, that white is salt. And that is because that's a lot of people don't know, Joe, that the Sahara Desert wasn't a thing until approximately 5,000 years ago. It's only in the last several years, and by the way, I'm quoting MIT research here, that the Sahara goes back and forth from green to desert approximately every 20,000 years. They believe it has something to do with the Earth's tilt, and that's worth discussing. But so this whole area, because people are like, well, that's not Atlantis. I'm like, well, first of all, if the Sahara Desert was a lush green tropical paradise, which had the largest known freshwater lakes ever known to have existed, for example, Mega Lake Chad, which is, like 3 times more water surface than all of the North American Great Lakes combined. It's a big sucker.
Holy shit! How's it not an ocean?
I know.
It's all fresh water?
It was when it existed, and that was at the time when the Sahara was green. And it also had some of the largest known rivers were known to have existed throughout the world. I think they'd still be ranked 10th today or something like that. But so you have to, when you see this, people have to imagine that this area was once green, and that because one of the arguments I make is that the fact that that salt is on top of that dirt, to me, is indicative that the ocean flowed over here far more recently than what people think.
How wide is this structure?
Okay, so
these concentric circles.
I brought a laser. Do you have a laser pointer in here?
No.
It's okay. So the circles themselves is about 14.5 miles across. However, if you go the complete shebang, the whole circle itself is just shy of 30 miles.
So the whole thing is 30 miles, which would be like the size of a city.
Right. Well, keep in mind the outer ring would have been water, so that wouldn't have necessarily counted. But some people will say that this is too big according to Plato's description. And let me just say that I'm like, well, hold on a second. I don't think that we should consider that because of loss of translation, that we should consider the measurements a key detail. The question becomes, is it big enough to be a city with possibly millions of people? Because the way it was described is that it was a city that was said to be busy all day, all night, rich in trade, with languages spoken from all over. So I'm like, okay, that would imply millions of people. I mean, if a city's busy all day and all night, I think of large metropolitan areas like New York, Chicago, London, whatever. And so if this was indeed an ancient or a site of an ancient civilization, well, then it would have. I mean, they're obviously not going to have skyscrapers, so it would have to be an area big enough to sustain that many people, and the Richat structure certainly does.
And so the idea would be that this would lead out to the ocean, and that these circles would be where the water is, and then the ridges would be where the structures are, where the houses and the buildings are.
And people will say, well, where is that stuff now? I'm like, well, look at it. It got
those
obliterated.
Those people should shut the fuck up.
well,
but if you just look at what's going on with the sand and those clear water erosion marks on the sand, but that also could be wind, right? Couldn't the way that the ripples in that sand, couldn't that be wind?
Both. However, just to clarify.
Is that sand that is where the cursor's at right there?
Yes, that's all sand. However, it's also actually to the right where it says layers, Jamie, can you scroll in right there? Because that will show you the ripples more. So it's a combination of sand and rock.
You mean to the
left?
Right
left? There. That's what I'm talking about. Those are giant ripples. And I'm quoting Randall Carlson, who I consider to be an expert on geological formations. And so, yeah.
Right, but isn't that what wind-driven sand looks like? If you go to dunes look like that.
Yeah, and undoubtedly.
But hold on, this is sand, right?
Yes, well, it's a combination, rock and sand in between.
Right, but this is like what it would look like if wind-driven sand and rock underneath it.
Right, so what the implication is that it was blasted by water, and then after that, the wind has done its thing and moved the sand all over it and in between.
So 20,000 years ago, this was all green, lush forest?
No, Joe. 5,000.
5,000?
So
really?
Yes. So I could show you.
When did they think Atlantis was?
11,600 is allegedly when it was destroyed, which mirrors the Younger Dryas climate catastrophe. Because so Plato so this is 600 BC, and Plato said that it happened 9,000 years earlier. So that would be 11,600 years ago, which coincides with the Younger Dryas climate catastrophe, which makes it so compelling. To me, that is actual scientific evidence that indicates that Atlantis actually existed. Because it's very specific.
It is very specific, but it's not scientific, right? It's like there's no real evidence.
Okay, let me rephrase. That a civilization, let me rephrase. A civilization got fucked.
Yeah.
11,600. So never mind Atlantis. Let me rephrase. A civilization was around. The stories of it were passed down, and they got obliterated. So that's what I'm implying.
Well, we definitely know that the Younger Dryas impact theory is extremely plausible. There are, without a doubt, like many impact points on Earth where they find this tritonite, this nuclear glass, which you can get either from a nuclear explosion or you get it from some sort of a meteor impact, large scale, all over the continent. And we know that all over the planet, I should say. We know that happened. Like, this is like real hardcore geological evidence. So if we know that there were structures before that, which we do now because of Göbekli Tepe and a few other places that they're reasonably sure were pre 11,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago, then we know that something was around back then that was very sophisticated. How sophisticated, we don't know.